Okay, for this episode of the Collector Car Podcast, I love valuation trends and I do my best, slogging through the numbers. But when I can, I love to have the expert of experts on. So I'd like to welcome Dave Kinney. How you doing, buddy?
Chief Slogmeister, I guess, right? Going through, slogging through. I'm doing great. And yourself?
Good. So you're the chief Schlagmeister. I like that. And you're what, third time on the show? Maybe third, I think.
I think it is. Yeah. How about
Yeah,
that?
I
Returning
appreciate it.
guest.
Well, I talked to you about this. I like to have you almost every time there's a new valuation update. Might not be possible, but I find it fascinating, what's happening in the marketplace. We've all talked about generational shifts. I've often said, the guy whose dream car was a 57 Corvette, he's selling that 57 Corvette, or his widow is selling that 57 Corvette,
Exactly.
unfortunately.
Exactly.
But it seems like, you're the expert, so give me your thoughts here in a second. But it seems like the more towards electrification we go, you know, I think I'm hearing, some of the younger enthusiasts are going to the really old stuff like brass air and stuff, mechanical. I don't know if that's true or not, but why don't you just kind of give us an overview of the market in general and if there's anything that kind of popped out from this latest update?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that.
Imagine a journey so rare it only happened once. That's the spirit behind Once. Exclusive, one time only adventures that will never be repeated. Our next experience, American Muscle Legends, takes you trackside with the most iconic cars in history, complemented by luxury accommodations and behind the scenes access you simply can't buy. Spots are limited. When it's gone, it's gone. You can learn more at discoveronce.com/muscle. RM Sotheby's is the world's largest collector car auction house by total sales. They are the preeminent market maker of high-quality collector cars and collections, regardless of size or complexity. By working in partnership with the Sotheby's team and its network of 80 offices in 40 countries, RM Sotheby's has established the largest client network of any collector car auction house in the world. Join the RM Sotheby's family by connecting with one of their car specialists at rmsotheby's.com or contact me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised at how well, in some ways, surprised at how well the market in general is doing. It's holding up pretty well. We have not seen a time where people are running for the exits. That they've got to sell dad's car, granddad's car, or whatever. En masse. With people just making those decisions. Just sell everything. Don't tell me what it. Don't tell me what it's going to bring. In other words, panic selling. There's nothing like that now. And it's interesting, and your observation's great. There's, I would say the average age of the Franklin Club. Now, keep in mind that Franklins were air-cooled cars from the 1920s, basically. But the average age of the Franklin Club is descending on like a monthly basis because there's a group of people, I think mostly led by some people who were students at McPherson, who just fell in love with the cars, and now their friends have one, and their friends have one. And why is that? Number one, they're fun. They're mechanical. They're not impossible to fix. And it's kind of like a new badge of honor to have some of these old cars that are, out of your demographic. So, there is some of that going on. Of course, we'll go back a long time and we'll say what's going to happen. This was in the 1970s and 80s. What's going to happen to those vintage cars from the brass era, literally the time before 1915, and who the hell's going to want them? And it turns out some of the brass era cars, especially the high horsepower cars, are exceeding what anyone thought, and even their values adjusted for inflation and everything else in the 1970s and 80s. So it's hard to predict what's going to be collectible to the next generation. But interestingly, no one's going to be, well, no one is a too broad a statement. Very few people will be restoring non-major cars from the 1950s just because of the cost. You can have a $30,000 car or a $20,000 car that to restore it would cost 150 or 200,000, 50,000 of that being chrome alone. But that doesn't mean people aren't interested in it and aren't buying them. They're just not going to be showing them at the toppest level. The toppest. Look at me. Uh, my words are now failing me as well. At the top level, the old joke is there's an ass for every seat, and it continues to be true. Although I wouldn't want to have a collection of 1950s four-door cars in mediocre condition and try and sell them for big money right now because there's not a lot of interest.
Would that even go to two-door cars or
In some
50s?
in some cases, yeah. The more interesting, the better. But you don't know what's going to be interesting to the next buyer. It might be because of mechanical, it might be because of styling, it might be because someone in their family owned one. I've recently ran into a person whose granddad was a DeSoto dealer, and so they feel like they have to own a DeSoto. So they're looking at all these DeSotos from different ages, and they've kind of settled on they want a 1950s DeSoto. I think DeSoto stopped production in 61 or 60. I think maybe the last cars were 61, but they want a 50s car because they feel they can use that on a more of a weekend basis, and it's more understandable to modern mechanics. They're not going to be able to get it serviced at the gas station like was done back in the day. But spark plugs and things like that are still being made, and the kind of basic stuff is still still kind of easy to figure out and easy to fix.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't want to go down a four-door rant because I do feel like there's subsets of the four-door world. So take E39 BMWs, for example. I don't think the next generation has any
Sure.
stigma against a four-door car if it's a high-performance BMW, and
Right.
I think that even sprinkles into the E40, E36 with that four-door. But let's not talk about that now. Let's
You
save
know,
that.
but I will say, I think one of the interesting reasons why is because Mercedes and the guys of AMG, they did an awful lot of
Mhm.
performance four doors, and I think that really opened up the market for other German makes to kind of wait a minute, we can have our best in class in a four door, which is was something that was kind of never done on the performance scale. So you're right, but you're right, we probably shouldn't go down that
No,
because
no.
that's another episode,
That's
and
another episode. Yes, there will be a four-door muscle car episode at some point or something like that. Performance
oh,
car.
I thought you said we're going to have a four-door muscle car quiz because I'll start taking notes right now. So.
Well, tell us what did pop out of you as you like looked at the most recent valuation update?
Well,
Anything
we're
that was like a spike?
we're working on the latest book will come out on January 1st, 2026, and we're working on it now. And I can't kind of give you any like anything other than broad trends because we don't have everything in.
Sure.
I continue to be happy and excited that we're not seeing this big coming drop off as being other than kind of a static line of values for a lot of cars, not so much going down and very little going up. My still favorite from 2025 though is the Plymouth Duster. The Duster's driven all by the TV show Duster. So every Dodge Dart that was not a Duster has become a Duster with the addition of decals because there's the hipness factor to having a TV show star, and one of the stars of that show is obviously the Duster that the guy drives. And the funny thing is, for those of us who lived in the 1970s, the Duster was, shall we just say, the more affordable version. So it was a decontented car, and now it's become an object of desire. And we could do another podcast about how that happens, and what happened when the Back to the Future came out, and the values of DeLorean, which are now valuable to an entire wide range of generation of car buyers.
It's
So
crazy because I went to the Geneva Concours and there were nine DeLoreans in a row opened up, and one guy had all the stuff. He had the hover skateboard, he had the self-lacing
the
shoes, he had
the
every,
flux capacitor, all the
right.
stuff. Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
what is one of the most famous decontent? Wait, how did you say that?
Decontented.
Decontented
Yeah.
cars of all time that became very expensive European
Ro- Oh, I'm thinking Roadrunner. I'm thinking American car.
I'm
So
thinking Porsche Speedster, first
oh yeah,
generation.
of course. Yeah, exactly. Let's take the windows out. Let's make the interior cheaper. Let's, just, no padding at all, just vinyl glued to the walls. I'm making this up, but
Sure.
that sort of stuff. Give it, if there was a taxi cab interior, give it the taxi cab interior with some nice looking seats and sell it for more money. Take those roll up windows, throw them away, and we'll get more money for it. And
Right.
yeah, but that happens in our world, and it's kind of funny, and it's and it happened, and it still happens. I mean, there's still other examples of cars that have, kind of, had down market finishings, and they delete the air conditioning, which probably cost $1,000, and sell the car for more. But God bless America. That's what we like sometimes. So.
Yeah, and I meant to interview you after the September release. So obviously, while you can't talk about January, is there anything from September that kind of stuck out? I know I've seen some articles about some underappreciated cars that are doing well in the marketplace. I know some articles had, kind of the SUV pickup truck thing seems to be really hot right now, square bodies, that kind of stuff. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Well, I can tell you one thing. We've seen a decline in value of a lot of the Broncos that have been redone on an amateur level. Now, I mean, there's, without going into names of manufacturers, there are people who are remanufacturing Broncos and doing a really credible job, all the way to an incredible job with them. But a lot of people bought a Bronco. Let's say you bought a 66. You spent 60, 70, 80,000 on it, and it's just not bringing that anymore. So it's the typical thing that happens with oversupply in the market. It happened with the Toyota Land Cruisers not too terribly long ago. Everybody restored one, or the FJ40s, I guess. Everybody restored one, and then, a few of them came on the market. I remember seeing one at an RM auction, as a matter of fact, and it was just beautiful, gorgeous, and no one had seen anything that quite like this, for, since they'd left the showroom many, many, many years ago, and the car went crazy, and it became a $125,000 car for a very short period of time, and then it settled back down. And I mean, generically, let's call it a $75,000 car now, or
Right.
truck. Although that's what happens with the overbuild when a lot of people go out and spend the money on them. The market can't sustain it. The interesting thing for me about the classic Broncos is, if you spend a lot of money on a classic Bronco, and this is an old car guy saying this, why not just go out and buy the new Bronco instead, the one with the warranty and all those other things, air conditioning that actually is more than just, kind of a whisper of air coming out, all that sort of stuff. So, that's also another interesting thing in a marketplace. Sometimes people recreate a car from a different era, and then the manufacturer comes out and kind of does a tribute to that era as well in terms of the looks of the car. So that can be unsettling to the marketplace as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. And I'm going to give you two observations I have, and you tell me if I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. Okay. I read this article recently, and it was talking about, now these are sport utes like you were just talking about, but this is two stock ones in which the recent trends is tremendously different. So the first one is the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. Now we all know those were really hot there for a while, and is probably that generation that their parents had one, and they just were hard to find. They're rusted out, difficult to restore, expensive to restore. So those things were going up to like $80,000 or something. Number two, condition down 28%. So that's one. And the second one so my thought on that is the people that got them have them. That pool is done, and so now they might be like, this isn't as fun as I think. I want something else. And so that's my theory on that one. Now, the second one is the 1979 to 1972 Mercedes-Benz G-Class is up 68%. So my theory on that one is we all know the G-Wagons are still going strong. They're becoming ultra luxurious. They're becoming a status symbol. People cannot really afford your more traditional G Wagons, let's call it the later US spec ones, because those have already gone up in the marketplace. So they're going to the even earlier ones that are a lot cheaper, but also a lot more bare bones. So what's kind of your thoughts? Am I right, wrong, or
Well, I'm going to give you the perspective as the original owner of a Grand Wagoneer. I
Oh,
bought one. I
got no
bought
one
one
better.
in, yeah, I bought one in 1989, and I have to tell you, it was a tremendously disappointing automobile. My wife drove it. We had to replace the engine at 4,000 miles. The
Oh my God.
crankshaft on the 360 motor, which was an AMC sourced motor, the crankshaft snapped. And that does a little bit of damage to the internals of an engine. And no problems with getting that fixed. They yanked the motor out and put a new one in. And keep in mind, there's probably somebody wondering why they have a replacement block in their '89 Grand Wagoneer, and they're going, "Oh my gosh, it's not worth as much because it's got a replacement block." I thought the car was lovely. It was luxurious. It was a lot of fun from the cosmetic standpoint.
Very
Um,
attractive. Very
very
pretty.
attractive.
Yeah.
Last car with wood siding, basically. And that was an anachronism even back then. But it was a good car to have and to own in the rear view mirror. It also got somewhere between 6 and 8 miles per gallon. So from that standpoint, I love the looks of the Grand Wagoneer so much that I bought one new. By the way, it was $26,000, just to give you a reference point. And the only options basically were colors or sunroof or no sunroof. But from that standpoint, I get that people like them. I can't imagine a better car to have in the Hamptons or something like that, just for the fun factor. But everything broke on that car over a period of, as soon as it got out of warranty, it was a disaster. You'd put the window down and it would go down so far it would crack. All that quality control stuff. The G Wagons, I love the G Wagons. Having driven a few of them, I understand the difference between the newer ones and the older ones. The older ones were definitely, I mean, they're all truck based, but it was emphasis on the truck and a little more emphasis on the luxury in the later ones. Both of those cars are real statement cars. When you're driving it, you're making a statement. I think the drop in values in the Jeeps is just precisely the same thing with the that I was saying about the Broncos. A lot of them come on the market. People spend a lot of money to fix them up, and they are not a simple car to do a restoration on. Also, they were quite susceptible to the tin worm, aka rust. The G wagons, I've seen them being sourced from South America, from other countries outside of Germany, and basically into some of the farther reaches of Europe, and coming back in. I'm seeing the same sort of thing as I'm seeing with the old Land Rovers. People just absolutely love them. The German build quality is quite a bit better than the Land Rover, but I think that part of the appeal for a Land Rover is its ruggedness, and its ability to break down on you at unexpected times. And I think, in a real way, I think some people just love that. They love having the kind of the retro all the way feel, look, and possible drivetrain.
Right. Yeah, no, no. Yeah, I totally agree. And that's cool to hear from you as an original owner of one of those Wagoneers, because I was in New England not long ago. Maybe I was up there at Aldrain, and I saw one sitting in someone's driveway, and it looked like it was being used for its original purpose. It wasn't a show car, but it also wasn't dilapidated. So it was kind of cool to see that. All right, I have another car I want to talk to you about. This one, here's my opinion. 1985 to 1991 Honda CRX, up
Yeah.
50%, number two condition. I think this is a easy one. Disposable income. Guys like me, that those were around when I was in high school. You thought they were quirky, they were kind of cool. Well, today you're like, oh, those are really cool. They're pretty indestructible. Probably really hard to find a nice one. And so I think that's probably what is driving the price up on this.
I don't think there was any car that I ever, kind of quasi shopped for more than just looking at for the price guide, get kind of interested in. And it happens all the time.
Right.
But I don't think there was ever any car that, I mean, I was joking with some other people who were working on the price guide. It was like, okay, I'll give you $1 for every one of those that you can find with less than 200,000 miles on it. And it was almost impossible. I mean, okay, you'd find one with 185 or something like that. They were bulletproof. They were cheap. They were the right car for the time. They were a single person's car. You could not be you could be a married person, but you couldn't be a married person with a child. That's for sure.
Right.
They're tiny, and they were one of the first cars I'd call the roller skate era cars. Where they were absolutely the fastest thing you could find. They were totally fun to drive, and it would not amaze me to see somebody coming up with a 8,000 mile one that brings 60, 70, $80,000 with the right spec. I mean, I know that's speculation, but it would not surprise me to see at a high zoot auction somewhere to see that, because talk about an iconic, how do I put it nicely? There were surfer cars. I would say iconic stoner car, um, more than the CRX. If you had a job, you can afford one. You could buy one used for $1,700 or $1,500 or whatever. Back in the day, which was always kind of affordable. Grandma had that money for you if you really went and talked to her about it. That sort of thing. And they were reliable and fun to drive. And it's a car that I think has got a long, long, long runway in terms of collector value, because in the history of Honda cars, which is something that basically starts in America in the 1970s. I know there were 60s Hondas and all that, but they really weren't reliable import. There were places in California that had Honda dealers, but they weren't all over the country. That grew in the 1970s. But by the time the CRX came out, everyone knew where a Honda dealer was, and they were everyone's kind of default choice.
Yeah, I was actually in a storage unit. I won't say where, but this collector had seven CRXs, and one was almost delivery miles. It was like 80 miles on it. I had never seen anything like that before. And so that's a wise investor, I guess.
Well, I think that that's the automotive equivalent of having a few bars of gold saved aside.
Right, right.
Well, the gold doesn't go bad over time. Where cars, when they sit, can deteriorate. But yeah, I'm shocked to hear that there is a delivery miles one out there, and I think that's not a gold plated, not a platinum plated, like a cyber platinum plated car, just to the nth degree. Because and if it's a great color, like a red or a black or something like that, not a white or a silver necessarily, or has a great, number of options, or, color contrast to the interior, that'd be one to own.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's funny because my brother-in-law is not really a car guy. He's always wanted a BMW M3. And so I've been
Hmm.
helping him recently with the E46 generation. So I probably know more now about E46s than I would ever typically know. I mean, I love the cars. I wouldn't mind having one. And in my research, I found out, like, I think it's called the Laguna Seca Blue. That's a $20,000 color, same mileage, 80,000 miles is $20,000 more. And so we were able to find a black on black one. I think it was around 65,000 miles. Really nice car. And I really enjoyed driving it. I was like, this is cool. It really does capture the flavor of the era. What was cool though is my nephews are both 15 years old. They really freaked out about it. Actually, the driving force was my one nephew who convinced, told my brother-in-law he had to get this car. And the other day, they went on a ride with it, and my sister noticed he was wiping off a little smudge on the window. She's like, "Hey, what the heck? You never wipe up my car." He's like, "You got that. This is a cool car." Like he was all into it at 15 years old, which is really cool to hear. So,
That's always good to hear, isn't it? Yeah, and younger collectors, and of course, we go to Cars and Coffee, and that's where you need to look to see what the next generation is interested in. And sometimes it's real oddball stuff, and sometimes it's when you think about it, it would be the car that was in the video game and all
yeah.
that sort of stuff. But well, that's why I'm a Subaru WRX STI owner. So
Ah, there you
yeah,
go.
I mean. That's my number one automotive investment car. I have one pickled that I bought new, and yes, it's World Rally Blue, and yes, it has the wing, and of course, it's a manual transmission car. But it's my hedge against inflation. Let's put it that way.
Well, if I had unlimited funds, I'd buy up every low mileage Toyota FJ I could. Mine's a daily 2014 FJ, and it's 111,000 miles on it. And if I ever run anything under 50,000 miles, I just need to buy it. And
That's great.
that's a great car
What
again.
what color is yours?
Well, it's a color I didn't want, but now it's the one that color that people want, white with a white
Yeah,
top.
okay. Yeah.
For some reason the solid color white is what people want. I'm like, well, I didn't want white on white. It's just what was available.
I like the fact they came in brown, and that was kind of
Yeah.
early for the resurgence of brown, because well, I think that Minnie, probably was the one who brought back brown with hot cocoa was the name of the color. But yeah, I can see color specific being a big driver. Of course, that's in the Porsche market, that's it's crazy there because the paint to sample, but not even paint to sample in some sorts, the kind of oddball color. And this is a lesson for everybody. I my sister was looking for an F-150, and we went to a couple of dealers, and everything was red, white, black, and silver. There was no other colors. You can't find a blue one, you can't find a green one, you can't find an orange one, whatever. And when you do see one right now, even if you see one on the street and it's an oddball color, it really stands out, even on a pickup truck. And I got a hint for you, by the way. If you buy 10 F-150s, then you get a fleet deal. You can have any color you want. So
Ah, there
why don't
you
you buy 5 new ones? I'll buy 5 new ones. We'll get some oddball color, and in 15 years we'll make a fortune.
paint to
Uh,
sample F-150s. I love
yeah,
it.
exactly. Actually, I learned this because there's a landscaping company locally that has their own color on F-150s. And I'm like, how'd you do that? He said, we just had to buy 10. And then
I
that's what
like
they
that
did.
idea. I like the way I
Yeah.
like the road you're going down here, Dave. I like this. So tell me if I should buy this car or not. I was in a collection the other day and he had five or six Lexus SC430s,
Wow.
hardtop convertible, all immaculate. Not, I think the lowest mileage was probably 7 or 8 thousand, but most of them were in the 30,000 range. But the
Yeah.
one that really caught my eye was Pebble Beach Edition, dark metallic brown. I love that thing. Now I don't know the price offhand, but he's a good guy. So,
I remember
but
that.
but
Yeah. No, that's cool.
future
Yeah.
collectability, is that up there?
I would say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said that's a challenge. I don't think it's a challenge. I think that absolutely, it's something that would be sought after. It's funny because sometimes the special editions mean so little. They'll put stripes on something or a special color, but when it's researched and well done, and of course the Pebble Beach thing is always introduced on the lawn at Pebble or at the putting green. It'll be there on Sunday during the show. Sometimes they really hit it out of the park with those things, and so sometimes the car is more than just the paint, but also kind of the story behind it, and it makes it fun. I was just looking at the Bentley dealer just sent me a new thing about a special allocation of a car that they're getting one of, and it's the new Bentley Speed. And I have no idea what the cost is, but I don't know right now if it's worth it to buy a 300+ thousand dollar car to put away. I wouldn't think so unless you're in the 1% of the 1%, and it's something that you'd want to do. I think my mantra has always been and continues to be buy it for fun, and if you find something that's special that kind of winds your watch, then go ahead and get it. I'll tell you mine. It's an early Audi TT with the baseball stitched leather interior. I'm just like every time I see that, I leave a face print on the car because I've got my entire face is up looking at it because I just love that. And it's not a particularly valuable car and not a particularly expensive car, but I would predict in the future the ones with the baseball stitch, which is exactly that, leather interiors, will be worth some money.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to end on a weird note. I did not give you a heads up about this, but I'm going to end on
Sure.
right-hand drive cars.
Yeah.
And the specific reason is I want your thoughts on the right-hand drive white Ferrari GTO that's selling at Mecum in January. But before we get to that, do you feel like, because obviously R32s, 33s, 34s are hot. My theory, again, I'll give you my theory. My theory is that they will I feel like the R32s have slowed, the R33s have slowed, R34s are hot until there's enough of them in the US, then they'll slow. And then I'm kind of going back and forth. I'm like, I think everybody will go back towards the R32 as the first, the rawest, the coolest. But then I'm like, I don't know that people enjoy driving right-hand drive cars. And I think that fad, that trend, that yeah, it's neat, it's JDM, even for the non, Nissan cars, Skyline cars. Do you see the right-hand drive aspect eventually affecting the long-term value of these cars just because it's awkward?
Yeah, I do. It's one thing to drive a right-hand drive car when you're 28 years old, you're single, and you don't have that many responsibilities. I've owned right-hand drive cars before. I owned some, 1950s Bentleys that were just, cheap, almost throwaway type cars, and they were fun to drive, right-hand drive. But the one codicil I would say was I wasn't passing anything on the road with a right-hand drive car. It's very, very hard to pass something if you're on a two-lane road or even a four-lane road. Now in an era when everybody has a, warning on their mirror to tell them there's something in the other lane, it becomes a little bit more difficult to drive a right-hand drive the older you get. And I will give you, I mean, I'm just going to say from the standpoint of the old guy in the room here, I wouldn't want that as a daily by any stretch of the imagination right now. Now, having said that, I agree with your, the R32, 33, 34. I think the R32 is probably going to be the car that is going to be the long-term collector, but there's nothing wrong with buying the one that's affordable for you and the one that you want. I will say that if you get a job delivering the mail, it's the absolute perfect car to have because you're right up next to the mailbox all the time. And speaking of that, that's I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the white GTO that's coming up. It's going to be the first time of public offering of a GTO in quite some time. They're touting the fact that it's the only white one. I mean, I guess that's a value feature to some. It wouldn't be to me, but that's why they make chocolate and vanilla, right? I would prefer to have my GTO in a color other than white, but I guess in a sea of red GTOs, it would be the one that stands out. Maybe, you know, take the white one, put red stripes on, be that contrarian guy. I would love to know if that sells and what amount it sells for. I know it's going to, no matter what happens, it will make headlines. It's like when you see something about to happen and you know that it's going to make headlines, like literally the ball rolling towards a window, about to break it type of thing. And that's what we have. And it's going to be a really good sign of the marketplace. We used to call the January sales, specifically the Scottsdale sales, the bellwether for the market. There is no more bellwether for the market. And the reason why is because there's no more the market. We have so many collector car markets now. The people who buy 2010 and 2015 cars might have very, very little interest in the cars from the 80s and 90s. And, maybe when they mature and they get older and they have more money for more collectibles, they might do a look back on it. But the people with the 60s cars probably don't have any interest in the cars built from 2015 to 2019, for example, although some people do. There's an amazing array of automobiles on market now, and the amazing amount of collector cars that are being, every single day we produce more collector cars because of the, wide range of cars that have been made. It's going to be interesting. The next, I'd say 5 and 10 years is going to be a really interesting ride in the collector car market. But we have a headline coming out of the sale or non-sale of the GTO. That's 100% guaranteed. So it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, that's you brought up a lot of stuff there, but so the white GTO to me, it's going to be really interesting to see what it does for all the reasons you said. I don't think white's a selling point, honestly. I don't think it looks nearly as good. It is one off. There's a couple one off colored cars. Right hand drive, I think, is a big deterrent. It doesn't have the original engine, but it has a Classic K engine and it has good race history. So it's an interesting mix, but also 50s and 60s Ferraris are down pretty strong right now. Like it's quite a mix of stuff factors coming into effect there. And you just mentioned, collectors. I think 2010 to 2015 is a really sweet spot for like the last of the quote unquote analog performance cars. I think Honestly, I think that's a really good spot. But at Monterey, RM Sotheby's had like 14 world records, majority of them modern Ferraris, which they're not, those guys don't want the old stuff, at least not now, and like you said, the old guys typically don't want the new stuff or not the hyper stuff. So yeah, it's a really interesting market right now for sure.
Well, we have now well over 125 years of the automobile, and or another huge chunk of market. When I was first involved in this, the automobile wasn't, basically 100 years old. And so those are the changes that I've seen. But don't ever take anything, particularly on face value from quote experts, people like myself actually, because things can change, and you never know what's going to be interesting to the next generation of collectors. You can predict some things, but a whole bunch of things would be really really hard to to put your thumb on.
Well, brass era cars is the best example right there,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I mean, everybody wants one. I mean, anybody who's around cars, it's a lot of fun. And talk about analog. There's nothing more analog than a brass era car.
Yeah, Dave, as always, thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. I would
My
like to have you
pleasure.
back on maybe into January, beginning of February, a little closer to the results, so we can do a little bit more of a deep dive on what the fruit from 2025, I guess. Maybe we'll do it right after the Ferrari sale and we could dissect that a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, that's great.
All
We'll
right.
look forward to it. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Dave.